Emily Rhoda, Rowan of Rin. Chapter 1. The Meeting. One morning, the people of Rin woke to find that the stream that flowed down the mountain and through their village had slowed to a trickle. By nightfall, even the small flow had stopped. The mill wheel lay idle. There was no water to turn its heavy blades. The Buckshire drinking pool on the other side of the village was still. No bubbling stream was stirring it into life and keeping it topped up to the brim. There was no change on the second day, or the third. By the fourth day, the water in the pool was thick and brown. The Buckshire shook their heavy heads and pawed the ground when they went to drink in the morning and the evening. After 5 days, the pool was so shallow that even little Anna, who was only 5 years old, could touch the bottom with her hand without getting her sleeve wet. And still, the stream failed to flow. On the evening of the 6th day, the worried people met in the market square to talk. "The Buckshire could not drink at all today," said Lan, the oldest person in the village and once the greatest fighter. "If we do not act soon, they will die." "Not Star," whispered Anna to her brother, who was the keeper of the Buckshire. "Star will not die, though, will she, Rowan? Because you will give Star water from our well." "Buckshire cannot drink water from our well, Anna," said Rowan. "It is not sweet enough for them. It makes them ill. They can only drink the water that flows down from the mountain. It has always been so. If the stream stays dry, Star will die like all the rest." Anand began to sob quietly. The children of Rin were not supposed to cry, but Anand was very young, and she loved Star. Rowan stared straight ahead. His eyes were tearless, but his chest and throat ached with sadness and fear. The sadness was for Star, his friend and the strongest and gentlest of all the Buckshire, and for all the other great humped woolly beasts, each of them he knew by name. But the fear was for himself and Anand and their mother, and indeed for the whole village. Rowan knew, as Anand did not, that without the Buckshire there would be no rich creamy milk to drink, no cheese, curd, and butter to eat. There would be no thick grey wool for cloth. There would be no help to plough the fields or carry in the harvest. There would be no brood backs to bear the burdens of a long journey down the coast to trade with the clever, silent Marisbok. The life of Rin depended on the Buckshire. Without them, the village too would die. Alan could not imagine the valley without the village, but Rowan could, reading the old stories in the house of books, listening half asleep to Timon under the teaching tree, and, most of all, sitting on the grass by the stream while the Buckshire grazed around him in the silence of the morning. He had often imagined this place as the first settlers must have seen it. Hundreds of years ago, they had climbed through the hills, carrying the few things they owned on their backs, looking for somewhere in the strange land that they could claim as their own. They had came from far away, across the sea. They had fought a terrible enemy. On the coast, they had heard from wandering native people they had called the travelers of a place at the bottom of a forbidden mountain in the high country far inland. They had been tramping for many, many days in search of it. They were very tired. Some had almost given up hope. Then, one afternoon, they had topped a rise and looked down. There below them, nestled beneath a towering mountain ahead, and the hill which they stood was a green, secret valley. The people stared, speechless. They saw trees loaded with small blue fruits and fields of flowers they did not recognize. They saw a stream and a pool and a herd of strange grey beasts lifting their heads to stare, horns shining in the sun. They saw silence, stillness, and a rich earth and peace. The people knew then that this was the place. This would be their home. So they came down and mingled with the big, gentle animals who were tame and unafraid. They called them the Buckshire. "The stream flows down from the mountain," said Broden, the furniture maker, her loud voice breaking into Rowan's thoughts. He watched her stab the air with her stubby finger, pointing. So the problem must be up there. Up there, something is amiss. Something is stopping the flow. All eyes turned to the mountain rising high above the village, its tip shrouded as always in cloud. We must climb the mountain and find what it is, Brandon went on. This is our only chance. No, Neil, the potter shook his head. We cannot climb the mountain. Even the travellers do not venture there. Terrible dangers wait anyone who dares. And at the top, the dragon. Brandon sneered at him. You are talking like a crazy traveller yourself, Neil. There is no dragon. The dragon is a story told to children to make them behave. If there was a dragon, we would have seen it. It would prey on the buckshot and on us. Perhaps it takes its prey elsewhere. We do not know, Brandon. Alan the baker's light, pleasant voice rose above the muttering of the crowd. But if you will excuse me for talking like crazy traveller, remembering that my father was once, and it is only to be expected, let me remind you of what we do know. His usually smiling face was grim as he stared Brandon down. We do not know that we hear it roar almost every morning and every night, and that we see its fire in the cloud. Brandon rolled her eyes disdainfully, but Rowan shivered, tending the buckshot in the cold and dark of winter mornings, and in the evening when the sun had slipped behind the mountain. He, too, had heard the sound of the dragon. He had seen its fire, too, in the sky above the cloud. The buckshot swayed and grew restless at these times. The calves bellowed, and the bigger beasts pawed the ground, flared their nostrils, and huddled together in fear. Even Star moaned when the dragon roared, and when he stroked her neck to calm her, he would feel the nerves jumping under her long, soft wool. Suddenly, he realized something no one else seemed to have thought of. He must speak. Nervously, he rose to his feet. The villagers stared curiously at him. What could the boy Rowan, the shiny, timid herder of the buckshot, have to say? The dragon has not roared since the stream dried up, said Rowan. Not in the mornings, and not at night. He spoke as loudly as he could, but his voice sounded small in the silence. He sank back to his place. Is that so? Alan looked around the circle. Is the boy mistaken? No, he is not, said Brandon slowly. I recall it now. Indeed, there has been no sound from the mountain for days. She lifted her head. So I am right. There is something amiss high above us. I have told you what we must do. But we cannot do it, insisted Neil with dread. The mountain is too steep, too dangerous. We cannot climb it. Has anyone ever tried? Inquired Alan. Yes, said tall, straight-backed Marley, the weaver in dry cloth. In times gone by, some people did climb the mountain to look for new fruits to plant in our orchard, but they never returned. After that, the people of Rin heeded the warning and left the mountain alone. You see, Neil burst out, you see, if we climb the mountain, we will die. But Neil, boomed Bronwyn, if we do not climb the mountain, we will die. Brandon is right. We must make our choice, said Strong John, who was the keeper of the orchard. We remain here and hope the stream begins running again of its own accord, or we climb the mountain and try to remove whatever is stopping the water from flowing down to us. Both ways dangerous. What is our decision? To go or to stay? We must go, Marley replied. We cannot simply stand by and let death slowly come to our village. I vote to go. And I, shouted Brandon. I vote yes, said Strong John. I too, added Alan lightly. Yes, we agree, growled mighty Val the miller, who had stood silently, listening in the shadows, shoulder to shoulder as always with Ellis, her twin brother. Val and Ellis tottered together in the mill, grinding the grain into flour, endlessly cleaning the great stone building so that not a speck of dirt or tiniest spiderweb could be seen within its walls. Gilla, Rowan's mother, said that since childhood no one had ever seen them apart. Yes, yes, yes. One by one, the villagers stood up. Rowan looked around at the familiar faces, now so serious and so stern. Maze, the keeper of the books, was standing with her son and daughter. So were Timon, the teacher, and Bree and Hannah from the gardens. White-haired Lan leaned on her stick beside them, and even fat, soft Sola, who made soft toffees and cakes, could never resist his own cooking, had struggled to his feet. Then Rowan saw Jilla rise slowly and join them. His heart thudding with fear, he scrambled to his feet beside her. Soon Neil the Potter and 4 others were the only ones still seated. "So it is decided," cried Brandon triumphantly. "We will arm ourselves and set out at dawn." "Wait," said Marley. "We must not go without consulting Sheba." "That mad old hag, the spinner of children's nightmares and cure of pains in the belly. What has she got to do with this?" "Sheba is old, Brandon, but she is not mad," said Marley firmly. "As anyone who has been cured of illness by her remedies will tell you, Sheba knows more than herbs and spells. She understands the mountain as you and I never will. Sheba knows the way up the mountain, the secret way she was taught by the wise women before her. We must ask Sheba to help us." "This is a good idea," agreed Strong John. The people murmured. Many did not trust the wise woman Sheba. She lived alone beyond the orchard, gathering herbs and other growing things and selling the medicines, ointments, and dyes she made from them. She rarely spoke to anyone other than those with whom she traded, and when she did, it was seldom pleasant. The children of Rin were hardly a crew, like all of their race, but they were afraid of Sheba and called her not wise woman, but witch. "Oh, Count, what harm can it do?" called Alan, grinning. "If the old one can tell us anything, which I doubt, then all the better. If she cannot, you've lost nothing." "Traveller's foolishness," snapped Brandon. "This is not a game, Alan the baker. Why don't you—" "Enough," cried Old Man. She glanced at Brandon, who scowled. "We are going into the unknown," she said sternly, "and time is precious. We cannot afford to miss a chance to speed our way. Who knows Sheba best?" "I know her," said Strong John. "She gathers a herb that grows under the hoopberry trees in the orchard." "I trade with her," said Marley. "Her purple and blue dyes in return for cloth." "Then you two can go and beg her favor," sniffed Brandon, "since you were so keen to do so." She turned her back on them. "We will wait here for your return," said Alan. "Be speedy. There is much to plan." He laughed. "And take care not to insult her now. Like Brandon, she is not a woman to be trifled with." Strong John looked around at the watching villagers and pointed. Rowan jumped. John's finger was pointing at him. "Boy Rowan," called Strong John. "Little Rabbit, herder of the buckshot, run and get 2 cheeses from the cool house, the oldest, ripest, strongest cheeses from the topmost shelf, and bring them to us at Sheba's hut. Sheba is very fond of good strong cheese. The gift will sweeten her temper." Rowan stared open-mouthed and did not move. He was terrified of Sheba. His mother nudged him. "I will go," piped up little Anna beside him. "I am not frightened." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "Go along, Rowan," Jilla urged in a whisper. "Do as you are bid, at once." Rowan scuttled away through the crowd. "He's scared of his shadow, that boy," he heard Val the miller mutter to her brother as he passed them. "He will never be the man his father was." Ellis grunted in agreement. Rowan ran on, his cheeks burning with shame. Chapter 2. Sheba. Rowan was panting when he reached the cool house. Trembling, he climbed the ladder and took 2 of the oldest cheeses from their shelf. The cool house was packed with cheeses, vats of smooth white milk curd, churns of butter, plenty for everyone. But not for long, if new supplies did not replace the old. He left the cool house and hurried towards the orchard, beyond which lay Sheba's hut. He could hear the sound of the crowd still assembled in the market square, and was glad he didn't have to pass them on his way. As he reached the outskirts of the village, he thought about what Val had said. Stumbling slightly in the ragged grass, he began moving through the hoopberry trees, dodging the twisted, hanging branches. He thought about Sefton, his father. Sefton had come home from the market late one night, just after Anand was born, to find his house burning. A log had rolled from the fire and set the ground floor on fire. Flames were licking the staircase, and the house was filled with smoke. Sefton had shouted for help, then leaped up the burning stairs. He had pulled the unconscious Jilla and the new baby from their beds and carried them down to safety. Then, as the flames burned higher and hotter, he threw a blanket around his head and went back into the house, for Rowan in the attic. No one could stop him, they said later. Through the heat and the smoke beat everyone else back. Even the giant millers, Val and Alice, even Strong John, Sefton's friend. They saw Sefton at the attic window with Rowan in his arms. They saw him fling the window open and heard him cry out. They rushed to catch what he threw to them, his son, screaming in terror, wrapped lightly in the rug from his bed. And then they heard a crash and saw the roof fall in, and the flames leapt and roared. Strong John, cradling Rowan in his huge arms, gave a shout of grief. Sefton had saved his family, but he had gone from them forever. Rowan grew up knowing that his father had died to save him. He knew too that although they were never said so openly, many people in the village of Rin felt that the exchange had not been a fair one. The villagers were farmers and traders now, but they were descended from great warriors. And in their time when Rin was threatened, many of the older ones had fought to defend it. The War of the Plains was live in their memories and recorded in dozens of volumes in the House of Books. The people of Rin were proud of their tradition of courage. At an early age, every village child learned to run, climb, jump, swim, and fight. Rowan had trained with the others, but he had never been good at anything. He had always been small for his age. He had always been shy, and since the night of the fire, he had never been even quieter and more nervous than before. Val was right, he thought. He would never be the man his father once was, and neither would he have the strength of his mother, who since his father's death had worked even harder, ploughing the wheat fields for Star, planting and gathering crops, taking it to the mill. Rowan had been given the job of herding the buckshot because it was easy. Tending the big, gentle beast needed no strong arm or great courage. Only once, years ago, had a keeper of the buckshot come to grief, and the mine shaft into which she had fallen trying to save a wandering calf had been closed in long ago. A much smaller child than Rowan could have done the work, but he was allowed to remain with his beast, and for this he was grateful. The buckshot loved him and knew his voice. They would look at him with their soft brown eyes and nuzzle his hand when he was sad, as if they knew his troubles. In return, he tried to make their lives comfortable, learning to cure their ills, treating their cuts and bruises as his mother treated his, combing burrs and prickles from their woolly coats. When the winter snows blew in the valley, he would bring the old and weak to shelter, for he knew that the freezing winds could kill them, and he could not bear to lose even one. In the spring, when the blossom of the orchid sweetened the air, he would run and play with the calves and carry them handfuls of new peas he stole from the gardens when no one was looking. Rowan listened. He could hear the beasts now in their field nearby, rumbling and snuffling to each other as the sun began to dip behind the mountain. He wished he was with them, instead of tripping over his own feet in the orchard, with his arms full of smelly cheeses and his head full of shameful fears. He scrambled through the fence that marked the orchard boundary, and his steps slowed as he saw a light flickering from Sheba's hut. Despite the coolness of the evening air, her door was open, and gigantic shadows wavered and crept on the strange pale grass that grew before it. He began to tremble again as he approached. 2 of Bree and Hannah's children had once told him that Sheba could turn you into a fat slug if she chose. They pointed to the slugs that were picking from the cabbage leaves. These were all people once, they said. Look, that's our Uncle Arthur there. We know him by the spot on his forehead. He gave the witch a rotten tomato in a bag he traded for bellyache medicine. 1 rotten tomato in a bag of 20. And that's what she did to him. Goodbye, Uncle Arthur. Hello, Uncle Slug. Want to give him a kiss? They pushed the wreathing creature up to Rowan's mouth and hooted after him as he ran away. Rowan knew they had only been teasing him. He knew it really, but sometimes in bed at night, or if the buckshot strayed and he had to go near Sheba's hut to catch it, the children's story would come back to him, and he would remember the slow, fat slug with the spot on its forehead and shudder. Voices drifted out to meet him as he trotted softly among the shadows of the grass. Strong John and Marley, and another voice, cracked and low. Sheba. The stream flows down from the mountain top above the cloud, she was saying. Under the earth and rock it flows to Rin. And so you must climb the mountain to the very top, my fine friends. And no one knows its secret way but Sheba. Her mocking laugh rang out. Rowan thought of putting the cheeses down on the doorstep and running home. But as he stepped forward, the twigs snapped under the toe of his boot. At last, said Strong John's head. Strong John's head popped out the door. He put his arm behind Rowan's back and propelled him inside. The boy with the cheeses, I'll give to you, Sheba, he said heartily, in trade for your knowledge of the way. The old woman sitting by the fire sniffed the air and smacked her lips with a greedy sound. The cheeses, she gloated. Then she frowned, and her eyes narrowed. Bring them here, she ordered. Closer, boy. Rowan hesitated. Marley, beside him, gave him a little push. His feet fell like stones. He forced them forward 1 step at a time. What are you hiding? Snapped Sheba, half rising from her chair. I said, closer, boy. Come here and put these famous cheeses in my lap, for how do I know I am not being cheated, fobbed off with its second-class goods? They're the best we have, Sheba, said Marley. Rowan chose them himself from the highest shelf in the cool house. You will like them. So you say, scowled Sheba. She hunched her shoulders and stared at Rowan. In the firelight, her eyes looked red. Her forehead was bound with a purple rag, and her hair hung like thin grey trails around her face. She smelt of ash and dust, old cloth and bitter herbs. Rowan reached her chair, placed the round yellow cheeses on her lap, and backed swiftly away, holding his breath, trying not to look at her. But Sheba had lost interest in him. She was prodding the cheeses with her bony fingers, sniffing them one by one. Rowan hugged himself and shuddered, sheltering behind the tall figure of Marley from those terrible red eyes. What if he had chosen badly? What if the cheeses were no good after all? What if Sheba thought he was trying to trick her? The old woman looked up. They are good, she pronounced. As good as you said they would be, John of the Orchard. Naturally, Strong John bowed to her. Now, Sheba, said Marley firmly, will you tell us what we wish to know? Ah, brave Marley, Sheba giggled unpleasantly. She took some sticks from a basket beside her and threw them on the fire. It flared up as the sticks caught light, and shadows danced on her face as she turned back to them. Brave as you weave your cloth, safe at home, and dream of glory. But how brave will you be on the mountain? The mountain has ways of taming big, brave girls like Marley, if they are so foolish as to try their strength against it. It has ways, so many ways, as you will discover. Rowan felt Marley stiffen, and saw her cheek begin to burn red. We do not need your warning, Sheba, she said in a level voice. And John, Strong John, keeper of the trees, fine, tall man, jeered the old woman, ignoring her. Now, you come here to ask me favors, but what were you but a raggedy, bare-bottomed little boy like all the rest once upon a time, crying for your mamma when Sheba passed by? She bared her long brown teeth at him in a hideous grin. The mountain will not test your strength, John. It will destroy it, as it has destroyed the strength of men with twice your courage. You will twist and blubber like a baby in the grip of the mountain, but the mountain will not let you go. There was a moment's silence. Rowan was rigid with horror. Strong John laughed. Then he planted his hands on his hips and addressed the old woman sternly. "Quit your tales, Sheba," he said. "They are wasted on me and Marley. The boy Rowan is the only one to fear them here. You should not think us so foolish as to follow his example. Look, you have scared him half to death. Poor, skinny little rabbit. And he picked you such excellent cheeses, too. You should beg his pardon." Sheba went on grinning, but her eyes shone scarlet. "Laugh then, John of the Orchard," she sneered. "If the boy is the only one afraid, he is the only one of you with sense. It would do no harm to be guided by him." She again reached down into the basket beside her. "And so, indeed, I must beg his pardon," she cackled. Then, fast as a striking snake, she threw a stick straight at Marley, who yelled and jumped aside in her fright, leaving Rowan to take the full blow of the flying wood. Rowan stumbled back and nearly fell, the stick clutched in his hand and blood beginning to drip from a gash on his forehead. Strong John exclaimed in anger and stepped forward with strong fists. "A gift from Sheba," snarled the old woman, "and I do beg your pardon, Rowan of the Buckshire." "Sheba, you go too far," thundered Strong John. Her lips curved. "Do I so?" she said. "Well then, perhaps this meeting should be ended." "Not until you have told us what we came to hear," cried Marley. She glanced at Rowan, cowering in the shadows. "And quickly, the boy's forehead must be attended to." "It's only a scratch," said Sheba placidly. "But still, I grow weary. I am tired of your childishness. I will tell you what you need to know, as far as I am able. Wait." She lay back in her chair and half closed her eyes. Her hands stroked the cheeses in her lap as though they were cats. The fire glowed. She began to drone and mumble to herself. For a long time they could make no sense of her words. And then, at last, she spoke clearly. "7 hearts the journey make, 7 ways the heart will break. Bravest heart will carry on when sleep is death and hope is gone. Look in the fiery jaws of fear and see the answer white and clear. Then throw away all thoughts of home, for only then your quest is done." Sheba's eyelids fluttered and her eyes opened. For a moment she stared blankly at John, Marley, and Rowan, as though they were wondering why they were there. Then her expression sharpened, and she waved her hand at them impatiently. She no longer looked like a witch, just a tired, crabby old woman. "Go now," she said. "I can tell you no more." "But the way, Sheba, the way we must go," urged Marley. "You have told us nothing." "Have I not? Well, we will see. Perhaps you will feel differently by and by. Now leave me in peace." Sheba's chin sank to her chest, and she was silent. They waited, but she did not raise her head again. After a while, she began to snore. "She is asleep," whispered Rowan. "Asleep or pretending," said John in disgust. "In any case, there is nothing more for us here. We must go back. The others have waited long enough for us." They left the hut and began to hurry towards the village. "And we return empty-handed," exclaimed Marley, "with Rowan bleeding. Rowan, I cannot forgive myself for stepping aside and leaving you to be struck. I was taken by surprise." "The old devil intended Rowan to suffer," said Strong John grimly. "She was punishing me for laughing at her and telling her to beg his pardon. The fault is mine." Rowan, trotting along beside them through the orchard, was feeling dizzy and faint. But whether this was because of the cut on his forehead or simply the terror he had felt in Sheba's cottage, he did not know. Her horrible warnings whirled around in his head, and her strange droning chant seemed to have been burnt into his brain. He could not forget it. 7 hearts the journey makes, 7 ways the hearts will break. He found himself repeating it under his breath, beating time against his leg with the stick he still held in his hand. Bravest heart will carry on where sleepless death hope is gone. Put it out of your mind, boy Rowan, said Strong John uneasily, and look ahead. The village lights. You will soon be home with your mother. He exchanged glances with Marley. And what she will say to me for bringing him home in this state, he added in an undertone. Chapter 3. The Heroes. After inspecting the cut on her son's forehead, however, Jill simply smiled and shrugged. It was nothing serious, she said, and could be attended to later at home. All children had to put up with such things at one time or another. Rowan knew that her words were for him as much as for Strong John and Marley. She was reminding him to be brave, as befitted of Child of Rin, and not to fuss. Rowan knew that Jill worried about his nervousness and frailty. He had overheard her telling Strong John so outside their house only a month or two ago. She tried to be patient, Jill had said, but Rowan was so different from herself, and from his father, and even from sturdy little Annette, that it was sometimes very hard. She did not understand him. She wished his father was alive. Rowan had crept away and scuttled upstairs to the room he now shared with Annette. He had lain on his bed for quite a time, not thinking about anything, aware only of the dull ache in his chest. So now he stood beside his mother, with a swimming head and burning eyes, and said nothing. He longed to throw himself into her arms and cry for comfort, but there would be no comfort there, only shame. I told you Sheba was a waste of time, Brendan was saying, half in triumph and half in exasperation. Now she has two of our best cheeses in her grubby paws, and we are none the wiser. Never mind, Alan said, shrugging. We decided to try her, and try we did. Now, a new decision must be taken, for we cannot all climb the mountain. Who is to go? I will go, shouted Brendan. She glared at them all, as though daring someone to oppose her. Why not? Strong John said. No one doubts your willingness, your courage, or your right, Brendan. As, I presume, no one doubts mine. I, too, will go. Rowan's heart felt as though it was being gripped by an icy hand. He remembered Sheba's words. The mountain will not test your strength, John. It will destroy it. No, he gasped. His mother's hands tightened on his arm. And I, said Marley firmly, her eyes on Brendan. Val and Alice had been talking quietly together. Now, Val raised her gruff voice. Until the mill wheel turns again, we have no work to do, she said. So we too will join you on the mountain. Better that than sit idle waiting. You could do a bit of house cleaning for a challenge, Alan teased. Val stared at him coldly, while some of the older villagers exchanged amused glances. Everyone knew that Val and Alice did not like anyone to make fun of their fussy housekeeping. This is madness, cried Neil the porter, unable to keep silent any longer. This is no laughing matter. Brendan, John, Marley, Val, and Alice, the strongest of us all, going into the unknown. He appealed to the crowd. If they do not come back, these hotheads, how are we to survive? What will happen if the Zebak invade once more, or if some other dreadful danger threatens? Another dreadful danger does threaten, Neil, Old Lance said, right now as we stand here, perhaps the most dreadful we have ever faced, and to save the village from it, some of us must journey into the unknown. That is exactly why the strongest must be the ones to go. She turned to John. Still, I think the party is too small as yet. You need one more. Alan stepped forward. I agree. I will join the company to make the numbers even. He saw Brendan open her mouth to eject, and went on quickly. Brendan, I know I am only half-bred of Rin, and my strength may not match yours, but I am not quite a weakling. I have mastered, I think, all the skills the journey will require, and I have other gifts to offer, thanks to my father's blood. A cool head for one, a good way with a campfire for another, and a stock of songs and jokes that will not go astray. Besides, with the millers absent, and no flour to be had, how else would the poor baker occupy the next few days. You could come and dig my garden, Alan, piped Sarah, his mother. There was a shout of laughter from the people around. The old woman smiled. Only Rowan and Alan saw that her hands were gripping her apron, twisting the white cloth, and that her eyes were twinkling, not with laughter, but with unshed tears. She had lived long enough to have heard the old stories of the mountain and to fear its power, and Alan was her only child. But, like a true daughter of Rin, Sarah knew to hide her feelings. Only once, many years ago, had she let down her guard, and that was when she fell in love with the man who would become Alan's father, a laughing brown-eyed singer who came to the village one autumn with a troop of travellers. Rowan had heard the story many times, though the thing had happened many years before he was born, when his mother and father were children themselves. It was part of the village history, and was repeated every time a tribe of travellers came to camp nearby. Rowan could imagine the shock it must have caused when it became known that Sarah, the sensible village teacher, would leave Rin to marry a footloose traveller. Most people were horrified and tried hard to make her change her mind, but she would not be persuaded, and when the travellers moved on, she went too, leaving the peace and security of her old home to wander with the man she loved and his tribe. The people of Rin saw Sarah a few years after that, when the travellers chanced to come their way again. The small, cheeky-faced Alan was toddling after her by then, and her happiness was in her face for all to see. Some shook their heads and said her smiles would not last. And they were right, though not for the reasons they thought. For then came the 5-year War of the Plains, when again the people of Rin, the Marisfolk and the travellers themselves were forced to join in battle against the invaders from across the sea, their ancient enemy, the Zebak. As their ancestors had done before, they at last drove the Zebak from their lands, but the battle was long and cost many brave lives, and one of those was Sarah's husband. Sarah brought her young son back to the village after that. Without her man, the travelling life had no sweetness for her, and she wanted to settle again with her own people in her old home. But home for Alan was the coloured tents of the travellers, the smell of campfires burning in the night, open plains, forests, and winding roads that seemed to have no ending. Slender, dark-eyed and curly-haired, Alan was the image of his father, and very different from the 4 tall, strong children of Rin. Under the teaching tree, with Brondon, Gilla, Val, Ellis, and the others of like age in those days, he held up his head and smiled at their glances, nudges, and whispers. Outside school, though he worked himself hard to seem as like them as possible, he soon learned that his strength was no match for theirs, and that his wits were his best weapon. Rowan often felt that Alan might be the one person in the village who understood how he felt, as he too was the weaker and different from the others. Not that Alan had ever said so, but when he visited the house with Marley and Strong John, he often joked with Rowan and took an interest in what he was doing and made excuses for his mistakes. And now Alan too was to climb the mountain, trying yet again to prove himself a worthy citizen of Rin. John and Marley were looking pleased, and Brondon was rolling her eyes at Val and Ellis, clearly not liking the 6th member of the party, but unable to think of a good reason to deny him. Funny, easygoing Alan the baker was going to vanish with the others into the secret maze of cliffs and forests that rose above them. Once more, Rowan remembered Sheba's mocking face. "Ah, well, if you must go, you must. My weeds will have to thrive for another few days," old Sarah was calling, smiling and flapping her hands in mock despair, while her eyes still shone with tears. "Bless you, mother," said Alan. His tone was light, but the love and admiration in the words were clear for all to hear. "Now," said John hastily, for he was a man embarrassed by strong feelings openly expressed, "I suggest we go home and make our preparations for the journey. Then a good night's sleep should be had by all before dawn is upon us. Agreed?" The others nodded. The villagers called out their good nights and began slowly to move homewards. Some felt comforted because something was being done to solve the problem that had come upon them so unexpectedly to spoil the calm progression of their days. Some felt excited, even envious, at the thought of the great adventure awaiting the chosen ones. But many, like Neil, went to their beds that night with heavy hearts because the leaders and heroes of the village were going on a dangerous quest for the sakes and might never return. When Anand had finally fallen asleep, exhausted by the excitement, Rowan lay awake in his bed, looking out of the window at the huge bulk of the mountain. The moonlight was very bright, but the mountain loomed black against the sky, secret and full of mystery. Jilla had cleaned the cut of his forehead, but his head still ached, and Sheba's jeering words of warning tormented him. He tried every way he could to turn his thoughts to pleasant things, to Star, to the new calf soon to be born in the herd, to the taste of cool blue juice from the hoop-berried press, and to memories of the mother of his babyhood, a gentler, happier Jill singing to him. But as always, just as he was about to fall asleep, the other, darker thoughts came creeping back and made him afraid to close his eyes. Finally, he did sleep, a shallow doze filled with nightmares. He was back in Sheba's hut, but now its four walls were made of rock, dripping with water and slime. Sheba was huge, her nose long and pointed, her hair greasy grey tail swinging like thick ropes around her grinning face, her eyes red and piercing. Strong John and his mother stood there with him, but they made no move to help it as the witch bent towards him, closer and closer, till her face was all he could see and her breath scalded his cheeks. If you were the only one afraid, Skinny Rabbit, you were the only one with sense, she croaked, and she opened her mouth to scream with laughter, but she had no tongue, and the inside of her mouth was as yellow and smooth as cheese.